Hello there, welcome back to Versatroll, where we peel back the layers of ancient myths and serve them with a side of modern skepticism. Today, we're taking a thorough look into the flood narratives that stretch from ancient Mesopotamia to the well-known biblical tale of Noah. And to those who felt our previous video might have glossed over some details, today's deep dive is crafted just for you. We're meticulously examining every nook and cranny, from dusty tablets to the dark corners beneath the arks. We're not just skimming the surface, we're diving deep, because it seems some viewers are really keen on the finer details. So grab a comfortable seat and let's gently sail into the depths of these stories, armed with our trademark sarcasm, because it appears some folks might have missed the essence of our humor. Let's embark on this journey together, ready to enlighten, or possibly vex, the curious minds out there. Today, we're comparing the Eridu Genesis, the Atrahasis, the Epic of Gilgamesh, and Noah's story from the King James Version of the Bible. I've chosen the King James Version due to its familiarity, although the fundamental aspects of these flood stories are quite similar across various translations. For those interested in exploring the specific translations of the Sumerian texts, I'll provide links in the video description below. If you have any thoughts or preferences for different versions, don't hesitate to let me know in the comments. Feel free to pause the video when needed to read the translations. I'll show briefly. I'm aiming to keep the video moving to cover everything without extending your time or mine too much. Let's first discuss divine motivation for the flood. In Eridu Genesis, humans began to make noises that annoyed the gods, particularly Enlil, who was unable to sleep and decided to destroy humanity with a flood. In the Atrahasis, the noise of mankind disturbs the gods, prompting them to decide to send a flood. In Gilgamesh, the gods decide to send a flood, though the specific reasons are less clear compared to other texts. In Genesis 6:5-7, the wickedness of man leads God to regret their creation, prompting the decision to erase mankind. It seems ancient gods had a low tolerance for noise and naughtiness. Does that remind you of anyone we know who dismisses the links between these stories? All right, moving on quickly here, folks, to divine warnings and instructions. In Eridu Genesis, Enki warns Zaisudra to build a large boat to survive the impending deluge. In the Atrahase, Ea, speaking through a reed wall, advises Atrahase to dismantle his house to build a boat, warning of the impending flood. In Gilgamesh, Ea warns Utnapishtim in a dream to build an ark, stating that a flood will destroy every living thing. Genesis 6:13-21, God directly informs Noah of the impending flood and gives him detailed instructions for building the ark, including dimensions and materials. Dreams, divine whispers, and direct commands. Seems the gods had their unique ways to drop a hint. Maybe they should have sent a memo to certain skeptics. All right, let's move on to the Ark Building Specifications. In Eridu Genesis, descriptions of Zaisudra's boat building are lost, but it's assumed it followed divine instructions. In the Atrahasis, details are provided about the construction of the boat, including size and layout. In Gilgamesh, Utnapishtim is given specific measurements for the ark, including its dimensions and the materials to be used. In Genesis 6:14-16, Noah is given specific measurements and details for the construction of the ark, such as using gopher wood and making rooms in the ark sealed with pitch. If only IKEA were around back then, assembling arks would have been a breeze, or a nightmare, depending on your DIY skills. All right, let's talk about the cataclysm now. In Eridu Genesis, a terrible storm rages for 7 days and nights, tossing Zaisudra's boat on the great waters. In the Atrahasis, the flood is described with violent imagery, emphasizing the storm's ferocity and the gods' reactions. In Gilgamesh, the storm is catastrophic, described dramatically to highlight its intensity and the reaction of the gods. In Genesis 7:17-24, the flood lasts for 40 days and nights, covering even the highest mountains, described with a focus on the totality of the devastation. 40 days of rain makes a bad weather forecast look like a picnic, doesn't it? Imagine explaining that to a modern-day weatherman. Let's talk about how they checked for dry land in each version. In Eridu Genesis, after the flood, Sudra opens a window and makes sacrifices to the gods. In the Atrahasis, similar to other epics, birds are used to find dry land, reflecting a common motif across these narratives. In Gilgamesh, a series of birds, dove, swallow, raven, are released to find dry land. Genesis 8, 6 through 12, Noah sends out a raven and then a dove to see if the water has receded. Who knew that ancient bird watching was actually a critical survival tactic? Bet it's more reliable than modern YouTube critiques. Now let's talk about the divine reaction in these four pieces of literature. In Eridu Genesis, Sudra makes a sacrifice after the flood, which pleases the gods. In the Atrahasis, following the flood, Atrahasis offers sacrifices to the gods, which finally calms their anger. In Gilgamesh, the gods are attracted to the sacrifice, gathering around it. In Genesis 8, 20 and 21, the Lord smells the soothing aroma of Noah's sacrifice and resolves never to curse the ground again for man's sake. Nothing says apology accepted like the sweet smell of barbecue, right? A bit more straightforward than some convoluted arguments claiming these texts aren't related. Let's talk post-flood Confidant. In Eridu Genesis, Sudra is granted eternal life for preserving the animals and seed of mankind. In the Atrahasis, in response to Atrahasis' dutiful sacrifice, the gods agree to find less destructive ways to curb human overpopulation, like introducing mortality specifics. Essentially, they shift from flood control to population control. In Gilgamesh, immortality is granted to Utnapishtim and his wife as a reward. In Genesis 9, 11 through 17, God makes a covenant with Noah, promising never to flood the earth again, symbolized by a rainbow. A promise of no more floods with a rainbow as the receipt. That's some divine customer service, if only every critique were as clear and colorful. As we wrap up our comparative tour de force through these ancient flood narratives, let's not forget to splash around in some recent archaeological puddles that seem to muddy the waters for our friends who think these stories popped up in a cultural vacuum. Recent digs and scholarly shovels have unearthed a trove of evidence suggesting that the ancient Jews were not just sitting around waiting for divine whispers to write down. Oh no, they were busy mixing it up with their Mesopotamian neighbors, swapping tales faster than a trader on Wall Street. In places like Shuruppak, once thought to be as fictional as Atlantis, archaeologists have found layers of sediment dating back to around 2900 BC. That's right, real evidence of a mega flood that could have inspired 1,000 Ark Building DIYs. And let's not forget our pals in Israel, where findings show that these ancient folks were as connected to Mesopotamia as teenagers are to Wi-Fi. I've linked these articles down below in my description as well. Feel free to read them and do your own research. The next time someone tells you that the story of Noah is an isolated revelation untouched by human hands or historical context, you might want to ask them if they've been ignoring the archaeological memos sent from the past. It's not plagiarism, it's a millennial-older game of telephone where each culture adds their own flair to the message. Genesis, creation narratives, and the Enuma Elish share a sequence so similar that it's almost as if they were baked in the same cosmic kitchen. This blend of cultural jambalaya was brewing in a pot seasoned by centuries of trade, conquest, and the occasional existential flood. It turns out that the biblical flood narrative might have more in common with its Mesopotamian counterparts than some would like to admit. Who would have thought that the ancients were into sharing their apocalyptic survival stories as much as we enjoy tweeting about our lunch? Clearly, some people skip their history lessons to make more room for their biases. All right, folks, I won't lie. This video was a marathon to make. So if you're craving more, light up the comment section and hey, smash that like button, drop a comment, and don't forget to subscribe. Let's keep this train rolling.